very good day to you all. My apologies for taking so long between the last video and this one. I didn't really intend to take such an extended break, but it just kind of worked out that way, I'm afraid. So I do apologize, but hopefully all going well. We'll be back to regular updates as soon as I learn to speak. Now, I have been quite busy with the P-12E, well, as much as I can anyway, between life in general and that damn pesky day job that I'm still trying to dump. But that's another story. So yes, I have done a fair amount of work on the P-12E, and we'll start with a brief update on where we're up to with that. And here it is here. Here we go. That's what I've got done. Starting from the front, I cut my 1mm off the front and got the resin engine mount on there, and I got that all blended in. Fit fairly well, but always needs a little bit of extra work, doesn't it? So done that. Now on the bottom here, if you can see, I'm not sure what this is, some sort of sump maybe, but there is a little hinge door on there, which I have done with some 10 thou plastic card and 4 bolts that I've added. And also, if you can see at the back there, there's a little drain pipe, and I've added that from Albion Alloys micro brass tubing. And I've got the fairing on the top, which includes the cabin struts, whatever that word is. And I've also added the landing gear. Now, to date, this is probably the most time I've spent on a single component of this kit, was getting this damn gear to fit. It did not want to go in there. I ended up with quite a step on the front because I couldn't get the darn thing to fit down properly. And also, there were huge gaps on these fairings. So what I ended up doing was beefing that out with some plastic card and filing that and sanding it to shape. It's still not perfect, but it is far, far better than it was. I can live with it anyway. But I couldn't really fill in there because of all the detail around it, and because of the contours. It would have been just a nightmare to try and sound that to shape. So that was my sort of compromise solution to getting that. It is much better. I'm fairly happy with that. And as you can see from all the Mr. Surfacer and Tamiya putty on there, there were some pretty huge sink marks and misaligned mold seams that I had to take care of. So I probably spent 2 or 3 hours just getting that gear to look good and getting it to fit. Hopefully, it will be smooth sailing from now on. Yeah, right. Now, what else? Okay, I've got the windscreen mount there. I had always intended to replace that with acetate because it looks far better. The kit part is quite thick, and when I was looking at it, it's actually far too big. It's too tall, so another reason to replace that with acetate. And it'll be much easier to do that to get the mount done before any painting is done. It'll fit much better later. That'll be one of the last things to do. What else now? Oh, okay, scribed in, there's like a couple of doors on this headrest, and there's some handholds in there. I don't know if you can see them. I've scribed them in. There was quite a sink mark there, which I filled. The top has a piano hinge, and I've added that from 10 thou rod, scribed that to sort of resemble a piano hinge, I hope. And there's also a piano hinge here, which was missing from the kit, and I've done the same with that 10 thou rod, scribed to look like a hinge. What else gone? Oh, got the fin on, obviously. I've cut the rudder off because I'm going to move all the, or mount all the control surfaces in offset positions. I just think it looks better. And I've also, of course, modeled the rudder pedals and control column to suit the positions, and I'm going to put the control surfaces in. Now, one thing to note with that, I have hollowed out the back of the fin and the back of the fuselage there, and I did that with a Dremel cutting bit and finished that off with a round Riffler file. And that is so that my rudder will actually fit into that as it does on the real aircraft, and added sheet star in to beef that up and rounded that off so that it now fits into the fin as it should do. Now, I should note with that Hasegawa molded hinge points into the rudder. And this is another thing that it seems wasn't really standardized on the P-12. Some of them had them on the rudder, some of them had them on the fin, some of them didn't have them at all. Now, the aircraft that I'm modeling, of course, has them on the fin. So I had to fill them on here and then add them onto the fin, which I just did with files. Now, as you can imagine, because of the corrugations in the rudder, that was not a lot of fun to fill that and sand it without destroying the corrugations. And I've done this side. I filled that side, but I have yet to sand it because I needed a little break from that. It wasn't fun. Anyway, I'm not going to worry about the rudder just yet. That'll be added much, much later. What else have I done? Okay, I've got all the filling and sanding, hopefully, done on both wings. This pesky seam that they put in there, got that hopefully as good as I can get it anyway, and all the leading edges and stuff. I've also taken off the terrible looking navigation lights on there. I'll be replacing those. I think that's, oh, I've got all my rigging holes done because it's much easier to do that before you get the wings on. So all the rigging holes in the fuselage and the wings and the tail have all been drilled. Now, one thing I'll note with that, for those of you that are new to biplane building, because this is a mistake I've seen a few times, especially with those that haven't built a biplane before, they will drill the rigging hole perpendicular to the surface. And what happens with that is, as your rigging wire goes in, it bends down. It looks very unnatural, unrealistic. So it's important to drill your rigging holes at the approximate angle your wire is actually going to go in. Doesn't have to be exact because you will have some play in there, but you know, take a best guess. That's what I do, like that, and then your rigging wire will go straight in and not have any unnatural looking bend in there. So just a little note for those of you that are new to building biplanes, should you want to, and I think you should because they're pretty freaking awesome. And yes, obviously, once we get this painted and assembled, then we'll get to the rigging stage, and I'll go into that in more detail. So that's where we're up to with that. Oh, what else good? Oh, yeah. The tank, the belly tank, there's a piece that goes on top of there. Now, I've actually filled the seams. It didn't fit too well, as you can tell. And I filled that, and you may wonder why I bothered filling the top of the tank, but this is actually quite visible. There is a gap between the bottom of the fuselage and the top of this tank. So yeah, any seams in there will be quite visible. I didn't really notice that until I, really started studying this aircraft, that there's a pretty significant gap in there. So done that. That's ready. Let's see what else. Yeah, I think that's pretty much where I'm up to with that. So we're going to start with painting. Now, normally I would assemble as much as I can before I start painting. I would get the wings and tail on and everything, except for the upper wing. But in this case, because the scheme that I'm going to be doing is essentially, the box top scheme, which to me is just kind of the quintessential P-12E scheme. I think it's really attractive. But it will be tricky to mask, and it will be even trickier to mask with the wings in place. So, for a couple of reasons, I am going to paint that marking first before I do any olive drab and before I put the wings and tail on. It'll be much easier to mask that when I've just got my fuselage like this. There is another reason for that I'm going to do it before I do any other painting, and that's because, and I'm going to get to the color quandary in a little bit, but it's going to require a fair amount of paint to get that cheat line on. First, I'm going to have to do an undercoat of white, and then my my color coat on that. And if I did that after the olive drab, it's going to be noticeably thicker. There's going to be a raised line around there. So it's much better looking and much easier, I think, to paint that marking first, then mask over that, and then paint my olive drab around it, and I'll have a much more even and level finish. That's the plan anyway. We'll see if that works out. So, and that leads me to the color quandary. Now, I thought this would be pretty much a piece of cake, right? Fairly well-established scheme, 27th Pursuit Squadron. Not a problem, right? apparently not. When I came to look at this, it seems we don't really know what color that stripe was. There is pretty much everything from yellow to red and everything in between in all my references. So let's just start with P-12F4B in action. Now, according to these guys, where are we here? According to them, that stripe was yellow. Which, yeah, yellow. Now, my December 1964 Aero modeler says it was yellow-orange, or orange-yellow, one of the two. Yeah. Where else we? The kit, instructions, and microscale decals both say it was orange. And finally, we get to the lovely little Matchbox 72nd scale kit, and they say it's red. As does, what else? Somebody else. Oh, yeah. I discovered I actually have the profile on this aircraft as well, and they also say that it is red. So, interesting. Oh, the only one that's actually totally honest is Dana Bell in this book, and he says we don't actually know what it was, which apparently is the case because everybody's taken a guess at it. So, that leaves me with a bit of a quandary. What color am I going to paint this? Interesting. Really, the best thing that I can hope for now is to try and deduce what the color was from the black and white pictures. Now, as we all know, that kind of thing is fraught with danger. You know, trying to interpret colors from a black and white picture is just, it's not ideal by any means. But we have to take a best guess at it because apparently nobody really knows what it was. So I'm going to, and that leads me to another problem, is that every black and white picture I looked at, that stripe looked different. Case in point, where are we? The In Action book, when we look at this picture here, it looks that way. But other pictures of it, if I can find one here. Yeah, so we look at that one. It looks quite a bit lighter than the previous picture. And the same in the profile book. Where the hell that is gone, right here. Yeah, there again, it looks different again. Now, this is actually the aircraft that I'm going to model, this particular one right here. A couple of reasons for that. Number one, probably not really visible, but it actually has a white Boeing name on the red horizontal stripe on the tail, and you do get that in the microscale decal. So I thought, that's going to be a little bit different. Let's do that one. The other thing is, it's got the chevron on the top wing, and these are a bit different from the Navy chevrons in that it actually extends right out to the wingtip and goes partially under the national marking. So, kind of different. It's also on the underside of the wing. It carries back and mirrors the upper surface. So that's another reason I'm going to do that particular aircraft. So, what to do? What to do? What color am I going to paint this darn critter? Well, I'm going to use the picture of the aircraft that I'm actually going to model because it also gives me some contrast between the various colors. So, I'm going to take a stab at this. So we know that there are some colors on here that we know what they were. For instance, the horizontal, the horizontal stripes on the rudder and the background to the unit marking, we know both of those were red. And if we look at that stripe, I'll just get this a little closer so we can all see. If we look at that stripe, we can see that it is very slightly lighter than those two colors, especially the background of the unit marking. So I think it's safe to say that the stripe wasn't red. Sorry, Matchbox. Now, moving on, we also know that the wings were orange-yellow. Now, interesting note here, I know Tester's Model Master has a chrome yellow in its range. According to this book here, oh, this is turning into such a complicated thing. Oops. According to the monogram book, in the 1930s at least, there was no such thing as chrome yellow. It was just called orange yellow. And they actually do give you a paint chip back here. I don't know how accurate it is, but as a guide, what the heck? There it is, orange yellow. So that was the color of the wings. We know that. So if we compare, again, that stripe to the wings, we can see that it's significantly darker. So I think it's safe to say that, sorry Squadron, it wasn't yellow, and sorry Aero Modeler, it wasn't orange yellow. Which pretty much leads me to one conclusion, barring something bizarre like blue or green or fuchsia. I kind of think that it's probably orange. So congratulations, Microscale and Hasegawa. You are today's winner. You got it right. Tell them what they won, Johnny. Absolutely nothing, Andy. Not a damn thing. Oh, well, that's disappointing. Sorry about that. You don't win anything. Anyway, I think you got it right. That's my best guess. I think it's orange. I'm going to use specifically Model Master International Orange. What the hell, eh? It's as good as any. Now, it should be noted, of course, that, there are many different factors in photographs and trying to interpret colors from black and white ones, especially. For instance, the use of orthochromatic film, which I think is what this one was taken in. As you can see, the wings and that stripe appear to be quite dark. Orthochromatic film was on its way out in the 30s. It was widely used in World War I, but not so much in this era, but obviously still was, because I think this was taken with that film. But with the move to panchromatic, it gives you a little more realistic interpretation of color, shall we say. And obviously you've got things like different angles of light that would make some colors look lighter than they normally would. But what the hell? If Dana Bell says we don't really know what it was, well, I guess I can't be proved wrong if I go with orange. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, what I have done is, as I mentioned in a previous exciting episode, this particular magazine has some really, really nice 1/48 scale plans in it. Come on, work with me, people. And so what I've done is I've enlarged them to 1/32 scale. Now, fortunately, it does actually depict the 27th Pursuit Squadron markings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this line out, or this marking out. I'm going to apply it to the model on both sides with double-sided tape. I've made, obviously, a few copies here for that purpose. And that will hopefully give me a guide to accurately mark out the stripe on both sides with thin strips of masking tape. That's the plan anyway. We'll see if that works. Yeah. Let's carry on with that, shall we? And so, as you've probably deduced from the extremely high-tech montage at the beginning of this video, it did work quite well, actually. And I've got my masking tape laid out on both sides. It's, yeah, turned out quite well. Now, one thing I will say that if you do use that method, I would recommend using like a removable adhesive spray rather than the double-sided tape I used, because it was kind of a bitch to get off and it did leave a little bit of residue. But unfortunately, I don't have any spray adhesive, so I had to go with what I have. But anyway, it worked. There we go. So what I'm going to do now is just fill in all the other areas with larger bits of masking tape. I'm going to spray a white undercoat, and then I'm going to spray my International Orange. I've also done the faceplate. I just do that in Tamiya white primer. It is resin, so a primer is usually a little bit better for that. I'm going to hold off on the cowling for the moment because that needs to be assembled around the engine before I can paint that. So I'll do the orange on that part later. There are some black stripes that go around the edges of that orange, and I'm just going to do them with some strips of decal. But that'll obviously be done during the decal phase, or decal if you prefer. So again, I am using Tamiya Fine White Primer, which I've decanted into my airbrush. The only reason I'm using that is because it gives a really nice finish and it dries really quickly, so I can move on to the orange. But as I mentioned in my very first video and in my painting and weathering video, you don't need a primer for your paint to stink. In this case, I'm just using it as an undercoat because, of course, orange is a very crappy color to paint. It just doesn't cover very well. Ooh-wee, that's pretty. Look at that. And looky, Ma, no pre-shading. No, sir. Well, now, obviously, Tester's Model Master is an oil-based enamel, but I've cut it with lacquer thinner here, or as they say in England, cellulose thinners. And the reason for that is that it dries much quicker and it gives you a really nice, smooth, shiny surface. Me likey is nice. And if you're interested, the airbrush that I'm using is an Iwata Neo, which I obtained from Chilliwack Slot Car Palace, one of the sponsors of this channel. Do check them out if you're ever in Chilliwack, British Columbia, Canada. Well worth a visit. And there we have it. It turned out fairly well, I think. I'm pretty happy with that. It's always a good idea to unmask the culprit as soon as you can while the paint is still relatively soft, and that way you get less of a paint ridge buildup around where the masked edges were. So I've done that. I should note too that obviously the references that I'm working from, most of them are a good few years old. So it's entirely possible that further research has been done that has actually discovered what the color of that stripe was. So if anybody knows of such research, please do let me know in the comments. But be quick like a bunny, because if I'm going to repaint this, I got to do it before the wings go on. And that is the next step. Oh, one more thing. There's the faceplate. That's ready to go on the engine. When I get that finished off. And yes, so next, the bottom wing needs to go on. And the reason for that is that this center section here is actually part of the fuselage. So that needs to be blended in so it can be painted olive drab along with the rest of the fuselage. And that's one thing Hasegawa didn't do very well here, is they didn't make any kind of delineation, there's a cool word, between the fabric covered wings and this metal center section. It just sort of is one smooth surface. So I've just scribed in lines on either side just to make them look like they actually are separate panels, as they should be. So it's going to look like an airplane very, very soon. We'll get these on, get them blended in, we'll get that orange stripe masked off when it's fully cured. We can get on with the olive drab and painting the wings orange yellow, start assembling it, and it's going to be good soon. So that is going to do it for this episode. As always, thank you so much for watching. It's very much appreciated. And again, I apologize for taking such a long time with this video, but we will be back to regular updates for the next video. Stay tuned. And as always, make sure you share and comment and like and subscribe and tell your friends and jump up and down and build a model, eat some broccoli, you know, all that stuff YouTube tells you to do, because you gotta do it. Thanks very much and see you soon. Bye-bye.